Manny here once again. Welcome to DFS Zone, your source for daily fantasy sport lineup advice for the NFL and NBA. Before I get started with Week 14's picks, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate you guys drop a like on the video like always. And if you're new to the channel, first time here, never ever seen any of my NFL lineup advice videos or even NBA, I welcome you, and the only thing you need to do to be a part of the DFS Zone community, ladies and gentlemen, is basically subscribe down below. Make sure you put on that bell icon, that notification bell. Put that on so this way when I upload a new NFL or NBA lineup advice video, you will be notified right away when that is posted. All right. With that out of the way, we're here. Week 14, we're down. This is the last week of the third quarter, so to speak, of the NFL season. We still have, we pretty much we're down the stretch here of the NFL season. I was doing videos earlier in the year for the NFL. If you're new to the channel, it's first time ever seen any of the NFL videos, I was giving you guys 2 or 3 plays per position, what I thought were the best possible plays, but I've narrowed that down now over the last several weeks when the NBA season got into full gear, simply because I'm a one-man show. It's a lot of work for me. And, of course, I have a regular job and, of course, family and young kids and homework, and you know the whole deal. It becomes a very, very long day. So I have to so what I was doing also, I was giving you 1 video per position and going over 3 plays. And now over the last like 6 or 7 weeks or 8 weeks, I've been pretty much have narrowed this down to just giving you 1 video for the week, waiting to the end of the week like today, like a Saturday or Friday night, uploading you a video of what I think are the best possible plays this week. So that's where we're at. And that's what you'll be getting at least for the remainder of the season. So at quarterback, let's go to quarterback. At quarterback this week, I really like Mr. Phillip Rivers. Okay, Phillip Rivers is at home. He's been solid. He's coming in here 285.8 yards per game, pretty much 285 yards a game. Passing for 285 yards a game. He has thrown 28 touchdowns this year, and he's pretty much at about 21 fantasy points per game at 8,300 here on Fanduel. On DK, 6,500, so he's really respectable price there. I have no problem with him being played in either one of the 2 platforms. Obviously, if you play a lot of DK, you definitely want to lock him in at 6,500 on DK. He's one of the higher price quarterbacks this week. The matchup is perfect for him. He's coming in as the 7th leading passer in the NFL. He is averaging about almost 70% completion on his passes, and like I said, his numbers are already here. What I really stands out for me is that the last 3 weeks have been pretty darn solid. 20 or more fantasy points per game, which is above his average, which I really do like, and he's been consistently good as far as getting the ball in the end zone. 2 or 3 touchdowns per game pretty much every game this year. So he's been solid as far as getting inside the red zone and actually capitalizing and putting touchdowns across the board. His home and away splits: at home 72.6% completion percentage. He's been throwing for more than what his average is, 329.9, so that's 330 yards per game on average. 15 touchdowns, only 4 interceptions, and he's averaging about 25 fantasy points per game at home. So he is absolutely more dynamite at home. All right. Last 3 games he's been solid there. 12 games in a row. Like I said, multiple touchdowns, as you can see here right on the screen on the FanDuel. In the red zone, he's been pretty darn good as well. 7th in the red zone passing, 65% completion percentage in the red zone, 36 of 53, 250 yards, 18 touchdowns, just 1 interception, which is absolutely, a great percentage. Inside the 10, 17 of 23, 64 yards, 12 TDs, 0 interceptions. He's been solid. No Melvin Gordon. Obviously, he's going to open up the doors. I like the Chargers in general this week with Melvin Gordon out. Obviously, I'm going to have some exposure to Eckler and as well as Mr. Jackson and, of course, Keenan, Allen, and so on and so forth. So I think the Chargers are in a really, really good spot this week. If you're not on Phillip Rivers, at least consider either Eckler or Jackson, or consider Mr. Allen as well. All right. Going up against Cincinnati, man. Cincinnati has been pretty bad over the course of the last 4 or 5 weeks. They've lost, I think, 4 or 5 games in a row. They're coming in here 31st in passing defense, 280 yards per game given up to the opposition, and they're going up against a quarterback that's averaging about 285 yards and more like 330 yards at home. So there is definitely an advantage there. They have coughed up 26 TDs. That's in the top 5 in the league as far as most touchdowns given to the opposition. Versus quarterbacks, as far as fantasy point totals, most fantasy point totals this year, 24.9. DK, and they've given up 23.2 Fanduel, which is right in the ballpark of Phillip Rivers as far as how he has been over the course of the last 3 weeks. Red zone defense, they're 26th in red zone defense as far as the defensive unit. 69.5% of the time the opponents get it in the red zone, they have been able to capitalize and put a touchdown on the board. They have given up 3.5 opportunities per game to opposition in the red zone and have coughed up 2 touchdowns and 1 field goal. So nearly 70% of the time the opponents are capitalizing. So I definitely love the opportunity here for Mr. Phillip Rivers. So Mr. Phillip Rivers is my quarterback. At running back this week, last week I gave you Christian McCaffrey. He was solid. He's definitely another solid play again this week, but I'm not going to roll back with him. Barkley is in a great spot against Washington with no OBJ. You could definitely expect him to get even targeted more, so I'll probably have a little sprinkle of Barkley in some of my lineups. We're going to come down to Mr. Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara, 8,300. His price has come down a little bit. Obviously, in the last couple of weeks, he hasn't been super, but it does not mean that this guy is not capable of getting it done. All right, he's coming in here 62 pretty much rushing yards per game, 15 TDs, 21.4 fantasy points per game, 8,300 here on FanDuel. On DK is 8,100. All right, and already has played against Tampa. As you can see, they played in the first game of the season. He put up 8 rushes, 29 yards for 2 touchdowns. That was pretty much up close in the red zone. And then he was targeted 12 times with 9 receptions and 112 yards. He put up a 38 spot on FanDuel, and on DK put a 46 spot. His home and away splits have been pretty solid this year. 88 rushes for 401 yards, 66.8 yards per game. Okay, with 7 TDs, and he has had also 41 receptions for 295 yards, 49.2 yards per game, and 1 touchdown. He's averaging 27.4 fantasy points per game on the road. So on the road, he's been great. All right. I love the fact that they're going up against Tampa one more time again. Also in the red zone, he's actually been pretty good on the red zone too. Okay, 42 rushes for 124 yards. As well. So in the red zone, he's been very effective as well. Tampa, 19th in rushing defense. They've been allowing 121 yards per game, 14 touchdowns against opponents this year. In the last 3 weeks, this is what has happened with them. This is another reason why I like Alvin Kamara this week. Last week against Carolina, McCaffrey put up 10 rushes, 106 yards, 9 receptions for 55 yards and a touchdown, put up a 26.6 FanDuel points up on them. The week prior to that, San Francisco's Matt Breida put up 14 carries for 106 yards, 3 receptions for 34 yards. He also put up a 15.5 spot on them. And then 3 weeks back, Saquon Barkley of the New York Giants had 27 rushes for 142 yards and 2 touchdowns with 2 receptions and 10 yards added to that with 1 TD for a solid 34.2 fantasy points from FanDuel. In those 3 weeks combined, 354 yards given up to the opposition's running backs with 3 TDs. And then this week, they're going to have to deal with Mr. Alvin Kamara. So I think, and all 3 of those backs average over 100 yards, if you listen to that carefully. Everyone 106, 106, and 142, and they're averaging, they've been allowing 121. Kamara is obviously more of a receiving back. He can beat you with his hands and his feet because he's that dual threat back. Like I always tell you from the very beginning of the year, I love dual threat back running backs as well as quarterbacks because you get all those additional fantasy point totals that you can get from them. And especially on DK where you get that PPR, that point per reception, it definitely makes a difference as far as your fantasy point totals. Tampa also is coming in here versus running backs. They have 4th most points per game allowed, fantasy point totals allowed per game to running backs in the NFL, allowing 30.4 DK and 26 FanDuel fantasy points per game. Tampa Bay is one of the worst teams in the red zone. They have given up 85.3% of the time the opponents get to the red zone. They have scored at least a touchdown. They have allowing 3.5 opportunities per game to the opposition, and they have scored on 3 possessions out of the 3.5 times the opponents have been scoring 3 touchdowns. So definitely in a good spot for Alvin Kamara and the New Orleans Saints. All right. Let's move on. At receiver, we're going to need to have some correlation, okay, for Mr. for Mr. Phillip Rivers. So this week I'm going to go with his teammate and the guy that I think he's going to hit on, and he's been really, really playing well with him, and this is Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen is coming in here, 83 receiving yards per game, 5 TDs, pretty much averaging 15 fantasy points per game at 7,900 here on Fanduel. He's 7,400 on DK. Over the last 5 weeks, as you can see, he had 19, 7, 12, 9, and 10. The targets have been unbelievable. 57 targets with 42 receptions, 490 yards over the course of those 5-game stretch with 4 touchdowns. He has had 4 straight games with at least a TD, and he has had 14-plus fantasy points in all 5 games, which is above his average. So he's been trending slightly a little bit up. The team has been playing well, and I want to definitely have a part of this, especially that they're playing against Cincinnati. Home and away splits. At home this year, 44 receptions, 494 yards, 12.9 yards per catch, 3 TDs. He's averaging 19.2 fantasy points per game at home, which is above his average, so that means he's doing a lot better at home than he does away. Red zone offense opportunities inside the 20. He has 10 receptions, 88 yards for 5 touchdowns inside the 10, 4 receptions, 27 yards, and 3 TDs. So he has done well in the red zone, and he has been targeted. They're going up against Cincinnati. Cincinnati has been horrific. 31st in defense against the pass, allowing 280 yards per game, 26 TDs. Receiving yards, 28th in the NFL as far as receiving yards given out to receivers. 289 yards per game with the 26 TDs, allowing 12 yards per catch, and we have a receiver here who's averaging 12.9 in Keenan Allen. Versus wide receivers, they have allowed the 19th most fantasy points to wide receivers thus far this year, giving up 37.7 DK and 30 fantasy points per game on FanDuel. So a lot of fantasy point totals. Okay, definitely an opportunity for him to get hopefully a 20 or better this week, and that's all we actually are looking for at that price tag. All right, Cincinnati in the red zone. Cincinnati in the red zone, sorry guys. Cincinnati in the red zone, 26 in red zone defense, 69.5% of the time opponents get in the red zone, they have at least scored a touchdown. They are allowing 3.5 opportunities a game with 2 touchdowns and 1 field goal converted. All right, LA Chargers come in as far as red zone offense efficiency. They've been pretty good. 61% of the time they get in the red zone, they have at least capitalized and put in a touchdown. They are also getting in the red zone about 3.5 times per game, so at least 3 times a game, and getting 2 touchdowns pretty much every time they're in the red zone. And that's one of the reasons why Mr. Phillip Rivers has 2 or 3 touchdowns per game throughout the whole course of the season. All right, so that's where I'm at with the receiver. At tight end, I'm going to go back to the well, man. Last week I gave you guys at tight end. I gave you guys Eric Ebron. As a matter of fact, I forgot to put down the players up here. I've been doing that with the NBA. I'm going to do that also with the NFL. Where's Phillip Rivers? So this way you guys get an idea of what you have left, so you can start getting an idea of what is left in your budget. Keenan Allen. And then at tight end, I'm going back to the well. I'm going back to Eric Ebron. There's no Jack Doyle. Indianapolis looked pitiful last week, but he had a great game. Eric Ebron had a great game. He's averaging almost 50 receiving yards per game, 11 TDs, 13 fantasy points pretty much on average, 6,400 here. You know, I mean, last week, this is solid, man. 16 targets last week. Got 10 receptions, 81 yards. Did not get in the end zone, which I was hoping he would, because he's pretty good in the red zone. He is definitely targeting the red zone. As you can see, he's been pretty solid with 10.5 fantasy points last week, 19 and 26 and 11. His home and away splits have been good. 5 games on a row, 24 receptions, 272 yards, 11.3 yards per catch with 5 TDs, and he's averaging nearly 17 points per game on the road. All right. In the red zone, he's 6th in the NFL in red zone receiving, 10 receptions, 112 yards, 9 TDs. Inside the 10, 3 receptions, 13 yards, and 3 TDs. Love the whole idea of that, of Eric Ebron here. Versus Houston. Houston comes in. I love the factors that they're going to be in Houston. The roof is going to be close, and they are a turf field now, not a grass field anymore. So definitely it's like just being at home. You know, so I believe that's going to be a plus for them. They're 18th in pass defense and 20th in receiving defense, allowing 270.6 yards per game and 20 touchdowns to the opposition versus tight ends. Tight ends, eighth most fantasy points per game allowed to tight ends this year in the NFL, allowing 15 DK and 12 Fanduel. And we have a gentleman here that's averaging pretty much 13 fantasy points per game, so right in his ballpark of 12 to 15. In the red zone, 27th in red zone defense. 71% of the time opponents get in the red zone against the Houston Texans, they have at least scored a touchdown, 2.5 opportunities a game. They don't get a whole lot of them, but when they do, they have been efficient enough to get at least 1 touchdown and 1 field goal. So I love Eric Ebron here, man. Definitely would be the guy that you should be going with this week. On defense was a little tough, man, because again, you know, Denver's in a great spot against San Francisco. Pittsburgh's going up against Oakland. They're a complete mess. The Chargers are in a great spot. They're also in the complete going up against an opponent that's a complete mess. But I'm trying to find here enough space and enough money so that you guys will be able to do some other things. So I like the Saints here in this matchup. The Saints are going up against Tampa Bay. Granted, they played each other opening day, and we'll click on that. The Saints coming in here. They're allowing almost 22 points per game to the opponents and only averaging about 7 fantasy points at 3,800. Definitely wanted to find someone cheap. But in that first game of the season, they didn't put up nothing at all, as you see. No sacks, no interceptions, no fumble recoveries, no nothing. They were a -4. They gave up 42 whopping points. That was the one game that they gave up the most points. As you can see, they have been really, really tough over the last 4 weeks. 14, 7, 17, and 13. I always like to look at the last 2 to as much as 4 games, and this looks pretty darn good. And then look how well they've been defending and getting their pass rush going. 7, 6, 3, and 4. And then they've also had 5, 6 interceptions during the course of that time and 5 fumble recoveries. They come in here 4th most in the NFL as far as sacks are concerned. They have 37 sacks, which is tied for 4th. And New Orleans is also 13th best in takeaways with 19. So they come in here with some pretty good credentials, going up against Tampa Bay, who have allowed 32 sacks, okay, which is just in the wheelhouse for New Orleans. And they have also given up 23 interceptions and 7 fumbles this year for a total of 30 takeaways. So they're one of the worst takeaway teams in the league as far as they're, I think, a -6 or -7 in differential. So definitely New Orleans is in a good spot here, considering how vulnerable Tampa Bay could be as far as fumbles and interceptions, and them turning the tides over the last 4 weeks and being very, very dominant. So I like them at 3,800. You could come down. Also, the New York Football Giants at 3,500 also appeal to me simply because they're going up against Washington. At Washington, they have played well as of late too as a defense, and not only that, they're going up against Mark Sanchez. Washington's quarterback situation is in bad shape. So I think the Giants, if you're looking, what I'm looking for is to find someone here on the cheap side instead of paying up for the obvious, like Denver should do very well against San Francisco. Pittsburgh should do well here, and the Chargers as well. My New York Jets should be okay here against Buffalo. They got to watch out for Josh Allen. I think this is definitely a payback game for the Jets, so we'll see what happens there, but I'm not going to play them. But I think the best play, I like New Orleans right here. So you can pencil New Orleans in. As you can see, you still have $6,325. You can definitely get yourself a nice. Remember, I just mentioned there was a couple running backs like Samuels for the Pittsburgh Steelers, Eckler, Jackson. You can even go back to the wall and go to Spencer Ware. He's probably not going to be highly owned this week in his second week. So there's going to be some value at running back where you could pay down at running back, get one of those guys. As a matter of fact, let's just throw one in there real quickly. Let's throw in there, let's look for, where's the Chargers? Just to throw in there so you can see something else on the screen and you can take it from there. And let's throw in there, Justin Jackson. Now you throw Justin Jackson is going to get some snaps. There's no doubt about it. So he's $4,500. And I see that leaves you with some nice money to get to play well on your flex position. Remember, flex, we also like the flex spot to be someone in that 4 o'clock, okay? So this way you can swap them beforehand if you need to. But other than that, you should definitely do well and get yourself some decent receivers here at $6,900 a piece for these last 3 spots. So that's just to throw somebody. You could put Eckler in here. You could put Samuels. Samuels, I think, is just as cheap, maybe about $5,000 or something like that. So again, that's pretty much where I'm at, man. I hope you guys liked the video. Drop a like. If you're new to the channel and haven't not as of yet subscribed to the channel, please do so down below. just click on that subscribe button, please. And at the same time, make sure you turn on the bell notification. This way you don't miss out on any of my future videos. All right. And with that, I wish you guys a lot of luck tomorrow on week 14 of the NFL. And I'll see you guys next Saturday or Friday for week 15.